Okay, Mary.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mary Birdsong. I'm the program chair for Presque Isle Audubon, and I'm very, very pleased to present Lisa Rainsong tonight, who is going to be telling us all about the sounds of nature, especially in the spring. She holds a Doctor of Musical Arts and Composition from the Cleveland Institute of Music and is a member of that organization's music theory faculty. She's also has a certificate as a naturalist from the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, and now teaches birdsong classes and makes field recordings of birdsong and insect song. In addition, she does field research on crickets and katydids, research that is done primarily by ear. So she's obviously a pro because we know how hard hearing, birding by ear, it can be difficult. Her recordings and photos can be found on her blog, Listening in Nature, and that's at blogspot.com. We don't have to clap, but please welcome Lisa Rainsong, who's going to tell us all about the spring chorus of birds and insects, and amphibians, sorry.
Hi everybody, I'm going to pull my screen up here so that we could share. And oh, now I said from the beginning. No, that's how those house finches are, though. They'll just take right over. But no, the chickadee comes first. And I am coming to you from Cleveland, obviously, so I'm down the lakeshore a little bit from you. But as I was telling Mary, we who have friends, and that's all of us, who are downstate, whether it's in PA or Ohio, we've been seeing Facebook photos of people with all their wildflowers, their bluebells and everything else. And they've had frog song for weeks now and all kinds of stuff. And up here by the lake, we're like, our time will come. Our time is finally coming. So I am going to be starting, basically I'm going to back up the story to February. It wasn't that long ago. And then I'm going to take us all the way up to the present, right where we are now. So this is early spring in Northeast Ohio, and I'm sure it's like that for you. This is a spring picture now, isn't it? Sad. Sad indeed. Did your mourning doves not have some days like this fairly recently? These boys most certainly did. Our grackles always come back like around the third week of February. Every year I tell them, you guys, you were a little early. Do they listen? No. But then there's the robins. And people think that robins are only here in the spring, like later on in the spring, and don't realize that robins are around all winter. You're by the lake, you probably have robins in the winter. You probably find them in flocks going from one crabapple stand to another. But they don't sing. They don't actually sing until right about now. So it's not that robins are a sign of spring per se. It's when they're actually on territory and they start singing. Like just a little bit ago, there was a robin singing outside the window here. And even they, however, they may come back and like if your backyard is the territory, they may be there, but they might have gotten there a little too early also. He looks pretty tough, doesn't he? Doesn't he look like even though he's from the desert Southwest, even though he should be singing from a cactus, that bird looks like he could take on anything. This is a house finch. And do you folks all know the story of house finches? That they are originally from the Southwest and they were being sold in New York City in pet stores as Hollywood finches. And this was in 1940. And there was going to be a raid. They got wind of it and they said, oh no, we got to get these finches out of here. And so the pet stores released them on Long Island, and they didn't all die. And they just were kind of there for a little bit, but eventually they started breeding. They started moving west, west, west. The first ones got to the Holden Arboretum in Northeast Ohio in 1964. And by the time we got to the 70s, there were house finches everywhere. But I swear they still are singing as if they were in Arizona, because they're the first bird I hear every year. And it's not because the weather's so lovely, it's because the increasing light tells them that spring is coming. They're not going to go by weather or temperature so much as they're going to go by the light. This is in Lake County in the Northeast Ohio snow belt. And the recording that you're hearing is from that same time. The house finches were singing. They didn't care. So spring comes not all at once. It's really gradual and it's really uneven. And we're going to take a look and especially a listen at how spring progresses and who all is singing. Maybe some more singers than you might have expected. As I said, they're often the first bird that I hear singing in the new year. Do you ever keep a list like who you hear, who's your first bird that you hear in the late winter, early spring? I've been doing that for a while, and it's always nice, and it's always them. Now the chickadees, they may start singing as early as February. You all know this song, I'm sure. But this chickadee is going to give me a chance to introduce the concept of reading sonograms. So these are the notes that would be on the piano, which I just so happen to have right here. What you see right there, that's his notes. And this is what it looks like on the sonogram. This note is here, this note's a little lower, whole step. And the fact that you had this really bright white horizontal line means that the pitch is really pure. Really simple, really pure, just two notes. And they all do that. Now, if I go to Central Ohio and South, I get Carolina chickadees, and they're moving north. They probably are here too, where you are. But so far, it's all blackcaps here. That's their song. Pause and repeat. And when they have a confrontation, what they do is they do the same song, but listen to this. Listen what's different. Bottom, da-dum. That's two different birds. One is doing da-dum, and the other one of them has changed their pitch so that they don't sound exactly the same. And if you hear that, and you will hear that, da-dum, ba-dum, that's a challenge. That is a challenge, and one is saying to the other, you better stay over there. Don't you come any closer, because this is my territory. So they'll go on like that for a while, and I hear that in the spring every year all over Northeast Ohio. And I'm sure you would hear it too. But if their pitches get to be the same, hear how that one in the background is almost identical? The closer their pitches get, the higher the degree of confrontation. So when they start matching pitches and their songs get close time-wise and close pitch-wise, this is getting serious. So probably the next step would be a fight. So this is the warning. Oh, and then the nuthatches start singing. Doesn't this stuff make you so happy when you hear them for the first time? They've been around, they've been at the feeders, but when they start to sing... Now, I think you should probably be able to see this sonogram here. Notice how these, each one of their sounds is really a fuzzy kind of almost like a cylindrical shape. That's because the sound is so complex. It's got lots of overtones in it. It's not real clear and pure like the chickadee. So what you're seeing is this is each one of their ahs, and the fact that it is like this is indicating that there's a lot of overtones. The sound is more complex. Even their little conversational notes are a little more complex. I have a window open over here. We'll see if the cardinal that's outside is going to come to the window and say, "Who's that?" They'll start singing in February. Now here's the difference between the chickadees and the cardinals. Chickadees just do their 2 notes. Even titmice, they have a bunch of different songs, but they're all short and repetitious. Cardinals can speed up and slow down with their songs. So what you see right here is whit, whit, cheer, whit, 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 cheer. So what you're doing is you're actually reading the music of the song when you look at the sonograms. And they have a number of different songs. They can speed up, they can slow down. Listen to this. Here is a male. He's got something he has to say to another male who's in the distance. He hears that there's another male over there that's singing the exact same song. And he's got to say, "Oh, I'm not going to take that." He's going to change. Listen. Hear that? He's in the process of switching his song. So he's going to throw that one over at the other male, and the other male's going to say, "Okay, I have to match that one now too." Because all that singing that you're hearing, it's not just like, "Oh, it's spring and we're all so happy. Even though we're in the snow, we're all so happy. Spring is coming." Oh no, they're already starting to set up their territories. And it's not just because it's spring and they're happy. They're singing for the females. Look at her. She is going to evaluate and she's going to choose. They are auditioning for her. And she looks like she's a pretty tough judge, doesn't she? They better be good. They can sing as well. You don't hear it that often. And it's really hard to see them sing because they're in shrubbery, bushes, things like that, because they're not going to advertise where their nest is. But listen, she's talking to her mate who's up higher. That's her singing. So she sings to him and he'll sing back to her. And I can't always catch it. I mean, I may hear it, but this time I actually saw both of them, so I knew it was her. Here's another song from February, Morning Doves. Now this is one, if we were in person, I assure you I would ask you all to sing this song. Why? Because it's simple, and women, it's going to be in our voice ranges. It's probably one of, if not the lowest pitch song that we have in the birds, and that's why we can sing it, because we can't sing up there with the chickadees. We can't sing up there with the cardinals. Listen. Here's the actual notes on the staff. I dare you. Go ahead and try it. You're all muted. Ooh, 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 ooh. Yeah, you could probably sing that. And look at how the sonogram says, ooh, 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 ooh. Listen, that is not this downy woodpecker song. No, no, no. That's just conversational. That's his song right there. The song is the drumming, and this is true for all the woodpeckers. They have a lot of different things they can say, but it's the drumming that's the song. And both males and females can drum. So that's another thing to listen for. As soon as those woodpeckers start drumming out there, especially if it's on your downspout or something. Here's another one that's going to start early. Red-bellied woodpeckers. This picture actually shows you the red belly, which we don't see very often. Here's the male, red all the way across. Female is red, gray, red. And you're hearing two of them. Are they having a nice conversation? I'll tell you what they're saying because I saw them. I watched them for a good long time. She had a nice stash of acorns in a hollow part of a tree, and he was trying to come take her acorns. He wasn't saying, "Oh, you're beautiful, I love you." He was saying, "Give me those acorns." And she said, "Oh, I don't think so." And they flew back and forth at each other for a while, and guess who won? She won. He finally gave up and left. That's another one of their little quirk calls, but remember, it's going to be the drumming for any of the woodpeckers. And I put this in here for two reasons. One, I wanted you to see how gorgeous their eyes are. They're practically red. And also, if they want to eat something that's on a flat surface, they really have to go through a little bit of maneuvering to actually be able to pick that up. They do fine at feeders where they can hang on, but if it's something on a flat surface, they got to really twist and contort. Yes, indeed. Goldfinches look like two different birds. I have a little feeder right outside on the window here, and the goldfinches have been there all through the winter, and they're just now starting to get a little bit of yellow here. So they're only just now starting to sing, and they'll sing a lot more come April when they look like this. Yeah, this is really typical. Oh, look at that. It says March 18th. Is that not today's date? And that is exactly what I'm seeing out there right now. Just that little bit of yellow. But when it comes to finches, it's a little bit tricky when you're trying to tell which finch is which. Because you could have goldfinches and house finches singing at the same time. They can be near the same feeder. And it should be easy, but you know what? It isn't really, and I'll show you why. Look at the sonograms. Look at this. Now, right at the moment, you're hearing the goldfinch. Just switch to the house finch right there. It's not like it's a short song with a little pause and then they do it again or something like that. Not like a chickadee or even a titmouse or cardinal. They just go. And I find that this is not a bird that I would ask people to identify by ear. Not either one of these right away. I'd say, just say it's a finch, and then we'll refine it later. And then when people actually have a chance where they can watch the two of them and study them a little, then it becomes a little bit easier to tell. But that's not such an easy one to do if you have both of them. This, however, I don't think you're going to have a whole lot of trouble with this one. You know how we had a couple of really fine warm fronts now, didn't we? And didn't some of those red-winged blackbirds already make it back here? They may not have even gone too far because we've got some marshes along Lake Erie where they'll just kind of hang out there for the winter. Wasn't this glorious? Have you not had this yet? I bet you have. I bet you probably have had something like this where all those blackbirds are moving together. This to me is the sound of spring more than anything else. It's the blackbirds. And it just makes my heart so glad when I hear them all. Nothing subtle about this. And there's nothing subtle about March either. March is really, that's the back and forth between winter and spring. It's dramatic, and so are they. Now, we have a bunch of grackles right outside. They're in a couple of evergreens, and we don't, in Cleveland Heights, which is where I live, we don't have red-winged blackbirds typically, but we sure do have grackles, and they nest there, and we have a bunch of them. And I'm always happy to see them. It's like the first grackle of the spring. at this house, it's a big deal. Now, brown-headed cowbird, before you say, ew, it's a cowbird, let me just say a word or two on their behalf. They're a native bird. They are not a non-native species. The reason that they have been in such a difficult situation for the bluebirds and some of our warblers is we humans opened up the woods so that they could get in there. They used to follow the buffalo around. And in fact, Julie Zigafus said that they should be called buffalo birds as opposed to cowbirds, because that's what they were doing. But humans basically decimated the buffalo, and the prairies became basically wheat and corn. The woods got opened up, and the cowbirds had to lay eggs in someone else's nest because as they evolved, they were always following the buffalo. And so that's what they knew to do. I mean, that's genetically, that's what they do. And so when everything changed over time, they were still leaving eggs in somebody else's nest as if they had to keep moving to follow the buffalo. That's where the problem came in. And then, of course it's a problem. Of course it's a problem for bluebirds and hooded warblers and anybody else. By the way, if look at the song. It's really complex. It's very high. This is everything I just told you. And then there's, look at this. Look at this sonogram. That says it all now, doesn't it? So we read in field guides that it's conqueree, but it's really all for me. All for me. That's exactly what he's saying. Nothing subtle about that. Now, something you can do that's really entertaining is if you're by the edge of a marsh or a pond or something like that, and you've got red-winged blackbirds, see how many different calls and sounds you can identify as coming from this species. They have a huge repertoire, and it's endlessly entertaining. It's also entertaining that if they're stationed all around a pond, listen for one who's going to do his conqueree like that, and then the next one down has to say the same thing, and then the next one beyond that has to say the same thing. They'll go all the way around the pond, get back to the first one, they'll start all over again because everyone's got to sound off and say, this is my spot of the shore. So imagine it's March, which it is, maybe about a week earlier, well, maybe right about now for those of us who are up in the Northlands as we are. They're establishing their territories around ponds and wetlands. But something else is going to be singing too. And maybe it's not a bird. Isn't this another one of our defining songs of spring? Is when you first hear the spring peepers. When I listen, I don't listen just for a single species or just for birds but not anything else. More and more, I listen for everything in the habitat because it's actually one big ensemble. It's not just birds or just frogs. It's everything that's singing around that pond, around that wetland. So the spring peepers, they're right in there with the red-winged blackbirds. By the way, this is the vocal pouch. This is where they make their sound. And they are so small. Have you tried to find a spring peeper? I wish I could see you so I could see who's nodding yes and who said, I could never find one of those. They're about the size of your thumbnail at the most, maybe even more like an index finger. They're really tiny, but so full of attitude, as much attitude as a red-winged blackbird. This is where the music happens, right here. And they'll be in the water, but they can also be up here as well. This is the Latin name, and crucifer, as in cross, you look for the X on the back. That's assuming you can actually find one. But if you actually see one, look for that X. Because there's other little frogs, but that's going to be a defining feature right there. Here's a female, and she looks kind of wide here because she's got a lot of eggs. These are just blades of grass. That gives you an idea of how tiny they are. I was just out listening to frogs before I came home to do this program. Why? Because I wanted to just really enjoy the fact that they're singing out there, and it just helped me leave work behind and be present with all this. And that's what I was hearing. There's more I was hearing. You'll find out in a minute. This is what I do on spring break in a normal year. This year, wasn't the weather kind of bad last week? Last week was spring break week. It was just cold. So it was rain, there was snow. It was just not a nice spring break week. But normally this is what I would do. I'm out recording. And here's a really fine spring singer, tufted titmouse. I say theme and variations because have you noticed that they have a lot of different songs? Each individual bird has a bunch of different songs. So that's one of them. That's the stereotypical one. That's the one you'll have in field guides. But when I was first learning my bird songs, I didn't know that. So I would sit and listen, and being a musician, I would write down. I'd draw little lines in my little notebook. I'd draw staff lines, and I'd write down the songs. And then I'd try to match them up with a field guide, like an audio field guide. And I had all these songs that were rather short, loud, repetitious, and they didn't fit anything. And I finally just got so discouraged, I threw the whole little notebook away. And I wish now I had saved it because I know now, in hindsight, every one of those would have been a tufted titmouse. They have so many different songs. Now this is the stereotypical one. And see, I could write it just like as piano music right down here. But that's a titmouse. Have you heard this song? This is a really interesting song variant, and I only hear it in the spring. It sounds really hoarse, like he's a lounge singer that's just done too much singing in bars, except it's just a tone quality, and then he can switch right out of that and sing a clear sound. Here's another one. Listen, I'm going to have him do the hoarse sound first. He'll do that for a little bit longer. I'd like you to hear how he changes his sound. And I'm standing there with my microphone just recording him, and he's thinking about it. Thinking maybe he's going to switch out. Hear that? Right at that moment. I did not manipulate this recording at all. He did those little high notes and then he switched his song and he brought in the clear sound and left behind the raspy sound. I don't know the significance, but I have heard them do a whole series of songs, and I hear that in the spring. I don't hear that at other times, not even in the late winter. This is all the same bird, by the way. He changed his song again to this. Give him a minute here. Then he changed it to this one. I think he's going to change it again. Let's see. It's getting louder and more agitated. There, he did it. He changed it again. He wasn't done. I recorded this bird for 25 minutes. He was running through his whole repertoire. Now he's scolding. So he's upset. There must be another titmouse really nearby. And he's been showing off his whole repertoire. Listen to what he does next. That scream is him. Now he puts out a new song altogether. And hear those real high things way up here? When I looked at those in the sonogram and I really opened them up so I could see what was happening, it was another song. That is another song. It's just really, really high. But it's actually a song just as surely as this is a song. So he was going back and forth between them. I'm really impressed with titmice. I'm a professional musician and I gotta hand it to him. He's very good. But what else is happening at the same time as the titmouse? Where I am, this is happening right now. This may not look like a concert hall to most people, but it most certainly is a concert hall. You know who that is, don't you? If not, you will in a minute. In the vernal pools, we have wood frogs. Wood frogs, and there'll be a few spring peepers mixed in there with them. They don't sing for very long. It's only for about maybe a week to 10 days. Everybody comes piling into the vernal pools from the woods. It's a big mating frenzy. They're called explosive breeders. That is an actual term, explosive breeders. It's like everybody meets at the same time. Those eggs are released, those eggs get fertilized, and then they're gone. They're gone for another year. Look at them all. I was just by a vernal pool this afternoon after I got off work, and it was just like this. The water was just churning with all these frogs, and they'll just go after anything that moves. And in fact, sometimes the male frogs have to have what's called a release call, telling another male, hey, you grabbed the wrong thing. There's no eggs over here, buddy. They can start singing really early. There can still be a little ice around the edges of their pools. If you see them, look for the black mask. That'll give them away right away. And really, they and the spring peepers are the very first ones to start singing. They're singing in my area. They're singing right now. And I bet they're probably singing in yours too. I don't think that we're that different. Now, if you've never seen this, I was really happy to be able to get up close enough to one that was singing. This is where they make the sound. These two, it's like a vocal sac that's under the chin for the spring peeper, but it's over on the sides here for the wood frogs. And for each one of their little quacking sounds, they inflate and deflate these. Here's the female. You can see that she's full of eggs. So she's gonna just give it a go, and she's hearing all these males. She's gonna jump in there, and they are gonna lay and fertilize eggs. So she'll be releasing her eggs, he'll be fertilizing them. This is what one single wood frog sounds like. Just that. It sounds really labored, like it's such a big effort, but that's their song. Besides the black mask, they also have bands on their legs. Females tend to be a little more pink than males. But for most of the season, it's not even going to matter because you're not even going to see them. They're in the woods and they live a solitary existence, except for that maybe 10 days at the most. Once they return to the woods, it's a big deal if you happen to find one. It's going to be pretty difficult to find this one in among the leaves. And this is my favorite. How I even saw that one, I am not sure. But there's the frog. And it's silent. All that activity, and then it's silent. New habitat. New spring break story. This is going out into the sunny, wet fields, not the vernal pools. So there's going to be activity in the water and up here. Let's take a look and a listen. Isn't this another wonderful sound of spring, the song sparrows? That's yet another one that makes me very happy when I hear them singing. Now, some of them stick around, but a lot of them go. They don't go too far south, and they get up here pretty early. And once they're on little shrubs or small trees or whatever, and they're singing, it's wonderful. But now, it's not always wonderful. So, for example, this one was as far south as Akron, but still, it was not good. And he spent the winter there. He was tough. He got through it, but it wasn't very pleasant for him. Now, I've been talking about variation in songs, and one of the things that you'll notice is that song sparrows have a lot of different songs. They have a whole repertoire, just like titmice do. However, they will have more ornate songs than any tufted titmouse ever would. They change between them frequently, and they change in response to another male. This is really quite beautiful when you actually look at it. This is 3 different songs. These are sonograms here, and you can see they're like little works of art. There's a reason they're called song sparrows. Many of the songs have a little buzzy trill like that. This one also has introduction and then little buzzy trill, and then kind of like a closing idea. And one of the things that you'll notice, and I encourage you to watch for this, is that they are going to mark their territory with song. They'll start in one place, like this bird is doing right here, but then he's going to fly to another perch in another corner of his territory, and he'll sing from there. Then he'll go back over the other way and sing from there, and then maybe to another corner. So what he's going to do is mark his territory by singing from perches at each corner of it. So that's how they determine where the boundaries are. And that's how they tell other song sparrows that that's where the boundaries are. And while the song sparrows are singing, you might hear this. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this sound. Here's what it's like for us. In the Cleveland area, up in the snow belt, we have a lot of peepers, and we don't have these folks. But if we go just a tiny bit to the south and west in like Lorain County, Medina County, whatever, these little frogs are all over the place. And they're in sunnier, open areas, and if anything, they're even smaller than the peepers. This is what their sound is like. Here's the sonogram. People describe it as being like the teeth on a comb and running your thumb across it. Again, here's the vocal pouch. And these are just grasses from last year. That gives you a sense of how very tiny he is. And they will sing along with the peepers. Notice that black line through the eye if you ever get to see one up close. They can be heard with spring peepers and they can be heard with wood frogs. And those are the three earliest frogs. And so as I'm out there looking for frogs, no matter where I go, the robins are there. And robins are in virtually every habitat. So almost anywhere you go, there's going to be robins. And I never say, oh, it's just a robin. It's like, it's a robin. And how can you always tell the robin? Have you ever thought about it? It's the rhythm. It's not the pitches. It's the rhythm of the song. Da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, 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 ba-da-dum. Da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, 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 ba-da-dum. Just like that. And that's basically what they do. And they can sing different pitches, but that's their rhythm. Listen to this one. Same thing. Da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. This year I even heard them singing a little bit in February, but that's unusual. Usually they don't start singing until right about now. I stopped class today because there was a robin singing near the window, and I just stopped class and I wanted them to listen. And they will. They'll listen, they'll learn. And what I showed them by doing that was, hey, Dr. Rainsong thought that it was important enough to stop class for us to listen, because it's not just a robin. Okay, onto a larger marsh. Another spring break, another year. Hear all those frogs? This is where they are. They're all around my feet. This is Kilbuck Marsh. And I was recording a brown creeper up here because they like that kind of habitat, with frogs all around me. And at the same time, the phoebes, they return at the same time that the leopard frogs, which is what you're hearing, that they start singing. So those are paired in my mind. You know how phoebes like to be under a bridge? Well, maybe under that bridge is where the leopard frogs happen to be. And this bird was singing exactly where that picture and recording were from. Remember I said wood frog eggs? Wood frogs had gone right back to the woods, and here's the eggs. Here's all those eggs that were fertilized, and then we have leopard frogs that are singing. Very different sound. And they like big open areas like this, lots of water, and they can sing underwater, which to me is just astonishing. And listen to everything else you hear. Listen to the birds that you hear when you're listening to the frogs. Here's a close-up. I have to tell you, look at this line through the eye. Isn't that gorgeous? Breaks up the overall picture of the frog itself because it looks just like the grasses. They have spots. Actually, they're kind of more like streaks. And here's one I'd be so interested to find out if you have singing around you, because we have them in Lake and Geauga County, not too far from me. And I'm wondering if they're more common in the snow belt, and if so, maybe they're common by you too. This is the Pickerel Frog. They have rows of spots, but they're a little more brown. And their song doesn't sound so much like snoring as it does like, yeah, like a snarl. They'll start singing fairly soon. They're not quite there yet, but they will be before April comes. Hey Mary, how's my time? Because I don't have my phone with me to look at the time.
You're doing fine, Lisa.
Okay, I won't worry then. Okay, onward frogs. Here's the two of them. Leopard frog, pickerel frog. They're the same genus but different species. So they will definitely be singing by the end of March. And then finally we'll have green frogs. They don't call right away, but they're out there. Even when I'm looking at peepers and wood frogs, I may see a few wood frogs, but they're quiet at first. Once they get started, however, they're not quiet at all. They're the ones that you hear in any pond anywhere. You know that sound. If I do a frog program, I always give people permission to laugh because I know they want to. They just sound hysterical. Oh, did you see the passenger catching a ride? Right here. So from early spring, I'm not quite done yet, but this is kind of a place marker right here. From early spring into the summer, frogs, toads, all kinds of music of amphibians. They're part of the chorus. It's not just the birds. So listen to them together. And eventually, as you learn which species of birds are singing with which species of frogs at which time of the year, it creates a wonderful sense of time and place. And we need to protect the habitats for both. Protecting the habitat for the birds, protecting the habitat for the frogs, it overlaps. And you just ask any blue heron if it's important to protect the habitat for the frogs. But then we get to April and it should all be glorious, except not necessarily. As you can see, this was an April photo. This is me recording in April. Not everybody cares if it snows, however. You could easily pass right by this bird when it's down on the ground because it looks like a leaf, doesn't it? You know who it is? I don't know if I put the name on here yet. I hope not. It's the tree sparrow. Now, we associate tree sparrows with the winter because they're here in the winter. But, well, first let me say, red cap, single black dot, and a bicolored bill. Dark up here, light down here. What you're hearing is they're singing. And it's in the spring, for that brief little period that they start singing before they leave, that we have a chance to really hear what they do. It's a high, light, delicate song, just like their high, light, delicate calls. So with any luck, you might just get a chance to hear tree sparrows sing. It's not for long, because as soon as they start singing, just like a lot of the juncos, they start singing and they are on their way out of here. By the way, we have juncos that nest in Northeast Ohio. Do you have juncos that nest around you in Pennsylvania? We've got some folks that are studying this. I know, and you're muted.
Oh, hey, hi. Not up here in Erie County. We typically don't, but they do nest in Crawford County, just south of here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and most of Ohio would have no clue. But actually, they're fairly common in the northeast part of the state for Ohio.
Yeah, we just don't have them here in the summer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's the song. Really small window of time to hear it. Kind of like with fox sparrows. You don't get to hear them sing very much. Because by the time they're starting to sing, they're on the move. But it's one of those little April gifts if you do get to hear them. Speaking of juncos, usually when they start to sing, that's when their testosterone levels are getting up there. And they're all gonna start singing and they're all gonna start moving and they're gonna start heading north. Except for in those places where they actually nest. And in the northeast corner of my region, they are really adapting and they are nesting in people's flower baskets like house finches would do, nesting in people's garages, nesting on, like, say, a bird feeder on the barn, anything like that. So where it's more, higher elevation and just really the snow belt, that's where they are. And sometimes they are even forming new regionally specific dialects. So their songs are a little bit more complicated. And everybody in that same little spot will sing the same song. And there's folks at Holden Arboretum that are studying this right now and documenting it. When they do nest, they can easily have 3 broods, and sometimes even 4, because they start pretty early. So this is stereotypical to just have that trill. But just so you know, they can, in fact, in a very specific region, do some additional songs as well. I love to watch how they flash those white tail feathers and they fly all around the backyard. They're kind of fussing with each other and they're all trilling. So when I hear them singing, I know that spring is really getting established, because the ones passing through are going to keep moving. And then the meadowlarks. Downstate, they've had meadowlarks for a couple of weeks, but they're just starting to show up in Cleveland. So late March, wait a minute. That meadowlark that you heard, I switched it over. This is the starling, and it sounds like a meadowlark. So one of the things I had to learn when I was first learning about birds is that if I heard something that sounded like a meadowlark, but it was on the next door neighbor's roof by the chimney in January, then I knew I had to reevaluate that. So starlings can imitate everything, and they're very skillful at it. I mean, you can even look at the sonogram and see how similar those two are. So they imitate meadowlarks, and they imitate everybody else too. And any time from late March until early May, it just depends on how the weather's been, how the temperature has been. When there's the right moment, just like with the wood frogs, but a little later, these terrestrial woodland residents are going to suddenly pile into the ponds and wetlands, just like the wood frogs did in early March. Indeed, it's the toads. Toads are amazing singers. And did you know that they're really good swimmers too? How long are they in the water each year? Maybe a couple weeks at the most, week and a half. They too are explosive breeders. So they all start piling into the water. They don't go too far from shore, because to sing, they have to have their heads up above water. So they'll often hang on to the vegetation. When you hear them from the distance, it's like this lovely ethereal sound. If you get up close, they are loud and they are boisterous. This is their vocal pouch. By the way, they have gorgeous eyes. Just thought I'd call attention to that because it's really beautiful. I love hearing the toads. I get all happy when I go out and start finding toad choruses that I can listen to. And listen, there's going to be birds singing with the toads, because they'll sing during the day. So think of them together too. This is going to be shallow water. They're not deep in the lakes. They're going to be right around the edges. You can expect there's going to be song sparrows and other birds all around them. These 4 were all in the same very inconsequential, unimpressive little pond area by the parking lot. Every one of these boys. During their mating period, you'll see all these toad couples everywhere. Again, always by the edge. I think this one was pretty ambitious, to tell you the truth. But she's releasing those eggs, and he is fertilizing them. And there's the eggs. Look at all these individual eggs in through here. It's really quite impressive. Have you ever walked on a park trail very early summer or maybe late spring? Probably early summer. and you didn't know where to step because there were all these teeny, teeny little toadlets everywhere. This is why. So that's as far as I'm going to get with our journey into spring. We'll have warblers coming eventually. We'll have warblers coming after we've been hearing about them for way too long from farther south. But they'll be here. But in the meantime, there's so much to listen to, even just in March. And March is not over. We're only halfway through. So listen for the rest of March, listen into early April, and you'll hear all these folks that I've been describing. And so on that note, literally, this is the blog that Mary was telling you about, listeninginnature.blogspot.com. So just make note of that. Take a picture of my screen with your phone, whatever. And I've got years of stories from the field, stories like the kinds that I've been telling you now. And you can find out a lot more about toads. You could find out a lot more about the juncos that have their different songs. Any of the kinds of things I've talked about, you can find out more about them there. And with that, I'm going to just say that it's time for questions. So I see that there's already some questions in the chat, and I think Mary's going to tell me what they are.
This is Sue. I'll start off with the first.
Oh, okay. Hi, Sue.
Hi. Let's see. There was someone who was really interested about the types of microphones that you've used to record birds. This person says in particular, there's a little company in Newton Falls, Ohio called Wildtronics, and it makes parabola microphones. Do you have a comment on that?
Parabolas are the ones that go into the dish-like thing. So there was one picture in which I had something that looked kind of like a plastic dish. It's got a little microphone in it, and I don't know. Wildtronics. Oh, I guess I shouldn't write it on the back of somebody's homework paper, but that's assuming that they'll ever look. Yeah, let me I'm going to write that down. So thank you for that, because I want to look that up. And it's in Newton Falls, huh?
Yeah, that's what the chat says. And there's a lucky fellow from from Westbrook, Maine, and wondering how many had seen a Stellar's sea eagle. I guess there was one there briefly this past winter.
Yeah, I heard about that. I didn't see it, but I heard about it. I think it was one.
I don't know anybody who's gone to see it. I haven't gone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Wasn't sure. But hi to Maine. We like it there.
There's somebody here from Maine.
Yeah.
As far as recording equipment in general, I have a handheld microphone. I mean, not microphone, recorder. This is my microphone. It's called a shotgun microphone. So it's fairly long, and that's really helpful to me with singing insects, because I record them. They're in grasses. They can be in a blackberry tangle or whatever. There's only so far I can reach my arm into a blackberry tangle, but I can get the microphone up really close to it and get recordings that way. And it gives me a little bit more distance if I want to reach up to a bird song up in the trees. And then I just have headphones so I can monitor. So it's not all that complex, but it's sure, this is what I've been using for a long time now, and it works really well for birds, for insects, and for amphibians. Okay, other questions?
There's a question. Can you elaborate more on the timing of the start of singing and testosterone levels? Why do the birds not sing in winter?
Oh, well, it is testosterone. It's a combination of that and response to the length of the day and the intensity of the light. So by the time we get to February, days have gotten a little longer, and the light is just a little bit more intense than it would have been in December.
Okay.
That's all I can tell you. That's the general information.
Okay. And Michael in Maine says, for the latest on that stellar sea eagle, go to maineaudubon.org. So I'll ask you, Michael, is that sea eagle still there? You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's a random sightings. Last Doug Hitchcock from or Wilcox from the Maine Audubon, they had reports as late as the 15th.
So I take it you yourself got to see it?
No, we haven't, but we got a chance to have a nice hour-long talk with the sheriff who shoveled some spots along the bridge so we could have a safe place to look for it.
Oh, that's very kind. That story could have gone in a couple different directions.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments?
Well, I'm actually surprised that there aren't as many questions because there usually are a ton of questions, but you probably did such an excellent job of explaining what you do that you've left us all speechless. I had a question, but I ran into a computer problem and now I've forgotten my question. If I think of it, I'll bring it up.
Okay. And if you think of it hours later, you've got my email address.
Yes.
Lisa, I have a question. We
Sure.
have neighbors. We live in the woods. Our next door neighbors get spring peepers regularly and wood frogs, and we can't get anything in the vernal pools on our property. Do you have any thoughts why that might be?
And you live in the woods, right? And you're really close?
Mm-hmm.
We get the peepers, we don't get wood frogs.
Oh, my husband says we get peepers, but not wood frogs.
Okay. I don't know.
Okay. I'd like to attract them, but unlike a bird, you can't just put up a bird feeder.
Yeah. Is the vernal pool pretty shallow?
I think so.
Okay, because they do seem to like it pretty shallow, and I mean, like even what 6 inches or so, maybe. Doesn't that seem about right? Yeah, even 6 inches of water or so. They don't need a whole lot. And I have many pictures of them, like they're just right above the leaves that are on the floor. And it would be close to trees, but then it sounds like you would be close to trees. So that I don't know.
Maybe just need to give them some time. There's several comments in the chat about if people really enjoyed your presentation and thought it was fascinating. And I would
Thank
agree.
you, everybody.
Yeah. Well, how long have you been doing this sort of thing?
I don't know, maybe 15 years. My spouse Wendy is right over here, and so I'm looking at her like, no, maybe 15 years, 14 years, something like that.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Let's see, there's something.
And I've got one more year before I'm going to retire, and I'm going to do it all the time after that.
That would be great.
And I'm going to have to come out your way sometime and see what you have as far as crickets and katydids a little farther northeast from where we are, because I've been doing a lot of studies showing more southern species that are moving north, and they get to the Lake Erie shoreline, and that's kind of where they are stopped unless somebody actually catches a ferry to Kelly's Island or something like that and gets over there to the island in somebody's fruit sapling. But I'd really be interested in just giving a listen to how things are in Erie. And in fact, I did make a trip to Erie when Wendy was in Erie for work, and she heard it was the jumping bush cricket, right? Yeah. Jumping bush crickets were not a species that ever used to be in the Cleveland area, and they've been moving up, and I've been tracking them along the lakeshore, and she let me know right away that she was in Erie, and there was a jumping bush cricket singing in downtown Erie.
Oh,
and
wow.
Don't you know, when I got done teaching that day, did I not go up to Erie to record and document this cricket that was singing in a crack in the pavement? You bet I did.
So if we went to your blog spot, would we would be able to search for crickets in downtown Erie?
You'd be able to look for jumping bush crickets, and if
Okay.
you can find something where I'm looking at the ranges, then you can at least see my reference to the fact that they were in fact there. And there's isn't it's sort of like downtown where there's a college campus?
Yes, there is one. Mhm.
That's where it was. It was right by that. And is there kind of a city hall or some other city building down there right by the campus?
Yeah, right
Yes.
across the street. Yes.
It was in a crack in the curb in front of that building.
Oh my gosh.
And, if there's one, there's going to be more. But they never used to be there. They didn't used to be in Cleveland either. The closest they were for me would be Akron.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of things that are moving north. And I'm studying a little bit more, like getting just more general information about the birds that are moving north. Because we've got birds that we're finding much more frequently where I live, and you may be finding them too. Like Carolina wrens did not used to be common. In fact, if there was a bad winter, it just wiped them out. But now Carolina wrens are everywhere. We've never had so many. We have things like orchard orioles that are becoming increasingly common up here, and even some of the white-eyed vireos are moving up from central Ohio. There's a number of bird species that are moving north, right along with those singing insects.
Hmm.
Well, of course, Lisa, you're always welcome to come to Erie. And I personally would like to invite you to come out to Gull Point with me, which is the very tip of Presque Isle State Park, because I'm sure you would find lots of interesting amphibians. And if you're there at the right time of the year, you will have trouble not stepping on a tiny Fowler's toad.
Oh, yeah, we have. Supposedly they're at Lake Erie Bluffs in eastern Lake County, but I made so many trips to that beach because they were supposed to be where there was a tiny little brook that was going into the lake. I found only American toads. I made so many trips that people who would go out there regularly in the evening would say, "Oh, it's you again." Oh, flowers toads. Okay.
Yes,
I'm
they're
already
very,
intrigued.
very abundant.
Really?
Oh, yes,
Wow. I will be
very
in the
abundant.
Okay, you're going to be hearing from me about this.
Okay.
But what time? June?
We,
Is that a good time for Fowler's toes? Is June, May?
uh, I would say June more than May,
Mm-hmm.
because I know that like I in my shorebird duties, I go out to Gull Point every day,
Mm-hmm.
and at a certain time of year, they I start seeing the adults, and then probably in late June, early July, I don't know exactly. Um, I start seeing the little ones,
Oh, wow. And they
and
do like sandy areas.
they're everywhere. I mean, you really have a hard time not stepping on them.
And you get to hear them?
I don't think I've ever heard one.
Oh, it's god awful. It is so raucous. Look it up online and you will just start laughing. And I really want to record them. We heard them down in far southern Ohio, which is another place they are, only from a distance because they had such bad flooding down there so that I couldn't get to them to really get there and record them. But I'd really like to.
Well, when would they be calling? In the spring, like now?
No, they'd be calling, as far as I know, more like June.
Okay. Well, I'm not there to listen to Fowler's toads.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite possible that I've heard them, but I just don't know I've heard them.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a lot of leopard frogs out there,
Oh, good.
and I hear them. I know
Mm-hmm.
what those sound like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't really. I'll have to listen to the recording for the Fowler's toads,
Okay.
and then listen for them. My season starts April 15th, so
Mm-hmm.
I have plenty of time to listen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like this. It makes the American toad sound like the loveliest, most peaceful, gorgeous singer. It is so harsh, and so I mean, I can't listen to the recordings without just laughing.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that then. Oh, are amphibian numbers holding steady in your experience?
I don't know for sure, but there are, we've had some problems with chytrid fungus and things like that affecting some of them. And the big problem is habitat loss. Pesticides, habitat loss, all that kind of stuff. They are so susceptible. So, we may not notice problems with spring peepers right away because they're so abundant, but there will be some frogs. I know they're doing a lot of studies on wood frogs around here. So that's all I can tell you at the moment. I don't have specifics, but I know there's concerns. And I know that if some of these diseases really take hold, it could wipe out a lot of them. So it's worrisome.
Well, on a lighter note, Kirk suggests that if the American toad is opera, then a Fowler's toad could it be AC/DC?
Yes. That would be good.
There was also another comment. I appreciated your mini lectures on the natural history of house finch and cowbirds. Really interesting. Thank you.
Oh, so welcome.
And lots of other excellent thank yous. Wonderful presentation. Any other questions? Anyone?
If you see me looking this direction all the time, that's where all your little boxes are lined up on my screen.
This is Carolyn speaking up. I was thrilled to see both the musical notation and the sonograms for the sounds for the birds, and some of them were kind of hidden by the bottom structure of my Zoom screen, but I saw that up above I had Zoom view options, and I put the screen down to 50%, and then I could see everything.
Oh.
It might be something to keep in mind if you have any of your viewers finding that that some of the technical stuff that you've added to a screen is too far down or whatever. Just make the image a little bit smaller on the screen.
Okay, thank you.
That worked for me.
Thank you. And you can find a lot of sonograms on my blog posts.
Nice.
I often have them in there too.
I have a friend in Maine who is just discovering birds, and she is a musician, and every once in a while she'll send me a little audio clip and she'll say, "Can you tell me what that is?" Sometimes I know, and there have been a couple puzzles, but a lot of them are familiar to me, and I can do that. But I'm sure I'm going to send her to your blog spot and she can find some more resources there.
Mm-hmm. And she should listen for those titmice because they have so many different songs.
Yeah.
Okay. Carolyn, someone recommended that you introduce her to the Merlin Bird ID app. Because then she can, listen and Merlin can suggest. Now, I know that some people have had some problems with Merlin, so you have to, be careful with what it might be suggesting.
Yes.
You did get my Tucker titmouse right the other day.
Any other questions? Thank you, everybody.